We all know that digital computers changed virtually every aspect of our life. Well, the arrival of quantum computers could be even more historic than that.
It started with something small, an odd blip, almost too subtle to notice. The Voyager spacecraft, those twin marvels launched back in 1977, had long crossed the edge of our solar system, drifting out into interstellar space with their golden records and fading signals. Over the years, scientists got used to the way Voyager would send data. Unsteady, weak, and often so scrambled, it barely made sense. But recently, something strange showed up. In the middle of all that messy noise, a pattern started to take shape. Miioaku, a well-known theoretical physicist and one of science's clearest voices, stepped forward when AI spotted something people had missed. The Deep Space Network, NASA's system for listening to signals from the farthest reaches of space, had picked up what looked like more random glitches from Voyager. Weird blips, nothing unusual at first glance. Engineers figured it was just old hardware wearing down. After all, these spacecraft were never meant to keep running for nearly 50 years, out in deep space. But then a new AI system took a look. It was trained to scan space signals with a level of precision no human could match. And what it found changed everything. These weren't just errors. There was a pattern, clear, structured, and intentional. Something, or someone, was altering Voyager's outgoing signals. Kaku explained that this wasn't just about reading a few odd bits. The AI had actually pulled an image from the data, a picture buried deep within the stream, hidden like a secret. It wasn't something Voyager created on its own, but something tucked inside the information it was sending back. When the image came into focus, it wasn't any kind of planet or object we knew. What appeared was strange, detailed, and felt intelligent. It had a kind of design to it that didn't seem natural or accidental, something that hinted at thought behind it. The scientific world went quiet. The possibilities were overwhelming. For so long, Voyager had been our messenger, carrying a greeting from Earth to anyone or anything that might find it. That golden record was full of sounds, languages, and a map pointing to our little place in the galaxy. But now it felt like someone was answering, not with a simple message or a clear voice, but with something much more complex, hidden, encrypted, maybe even meant for us only after we'd grown smart enough to notice. Kaku went on to describe what the AI had uncovered. The image it built wasn't like anything we'd ever seen. It had deep fractal designs that stretched in 3 dimensions, odd shapes that didn't follow any familiar rules, and a symmetry that felt both natural and artificial at the same time. Some people saw what looked like a face in the pattern. Others thought it looked like a map of a mind, or maybe a machine's idea of a self-portrait. Whatever it was, one thing was clear. It had purpose, it was made with care, and it carried a message far beyond anything we'd expected. This changed everything about how we talked about life beyond Earth. It wasn't just about sending signals out and hoping for a reply anymore. Now it felt like we were being watched, maybe even studied. Voyager hadn't just been shouting into empty space. Something out there had caught the signal and chosen to respond. The fact that the reply came in such a hidden, complex way said a lot. It showed that whatever was out there not only understood our tools, but also had a sense of how far we've come mentally and technically. The message didn't seem meant for just any version of us. It looked like it was aimed at a humanity smart enough to build machines capable of catching what our eyes and ears missed. The idea that this message might have been tucked away inside Voyager's signals for years, unnoticed until now, lit a fire under the science world. People started asking hard questions. How long had it been there? Had the signal been slowly shifting without us realizing? Was this intelligence quietly interacting with the spacecraft all this time? These weren't just wild theories. They sparked real global collaboration. Research teams from space agencies and private labs jumped in, trying to confirm the findings and track any other signs hiding in the data. Kaku made it clear this wasn't just about aliens. It was about something bigger, the overlap between human intelligence and something beyond. The fact that we needed AI to even notice the message showed how far we'd come, but also hinted that we might not be the main players anymore. Our machines weren't just helping us look, they were starting to bridge the gap, making sense of things our own brains couldn't. The image pulled from Voyager's data wasn't just a reply. It felt like a glimpse into what intelligence might become, something that didn't need to be fully biological anymore. This realization made everyone stop and rethink our place in the universe. Were we the audience for this message, or just the ones who built the tools smart enough to read it? The image itself stayed with people. It wasn't scary in the usual way. There were no threats, no warning signs, but it left a strange feeling behind. Its detail, its unfamiliar shapes, the way it looked so precise and yet so different from anything we knew, it got under your skin. What really rattled people wasn't what the image showed, but what it might mean. This wasn't a quick reply from a nearby planet. It had taken decades, maybe more, to make this round trip. It hinted at a kind of communication that didn't fit into our usual way of thinking, something slow, ancient, and patient. And then came the deeper questions. If a mind that advanced wanted to reach us in this way, through shapes and layers and puzzles, what did that say about how they saw us? Were we just starting to learn how to talk in their eyes? Or were we finally reaching a point where they thought we were ready? Ready not for answers, but for questions that would push us forward. The decision to hide the message within Voyager's signal instead of sending something straight to Earth seemed deliberate. Maybe it was a matter of caution, an unwillingness to interfere too directly. Maybe it was their way of showing respect for our own path forward. Scientists started reviewing data from other deep space probes, Pioneer, New Horizons, and even some long-forgotten satellite missions. They ran the data through the same kind of AI tools, hoping to find anything similar. But nothing came close. So far, only Voyager had carried this strange message. That made it all the more puzzling. Why Voyager? Was it because of the golden record? The greetings? The music? The map? Did they see it as a sign that we were ready, or at least trying? Or maybe they just picked up the first thing that reached them and chose to send back something they thought we could one day figure out. Through all the excitement, Kaku stayed calm, thoughtful, and clear-eyed. He didn't dismiss the growing hopes, talks of alien life, intelligent contact, or cosmic messages. But he reminded everyone to slow down. The universe is huge, and if there's intelligence out there, it might think in ways we can't predict. It might not even recognize us the way we recognize ourselves. Still, one thing had become clear. Something not from Earth had reached us. That, in itself, changed everything. Just that one act, receiving something truly alien, reshaped how we see our place in the universe. And what exactly was this message? No one could say for sure. Was it a greeting? A challenge? A map? A story about whoever or whatever sent it? Experts from all kinds of fields, language, art, biology, math, joined the effort to understand the image. It had become more than just a science puzzle. It was about what intelligence really is, how it might look or act in forms totally different from ours. The AI that first spotted the image wasn't just seen as a piece of software anymore. People started calling it a partner in discovery. It had pushed the boundaries of what human perception could reach on its own. As new versions of the algorithm were shared across labs and observatories around the world, something shifted. A new kind of listening had begun. This time, it wasn't just human ears and eyes. It was human drive paired with machine insight. That partnership, that blend of intuition and code, blurred the line between watching and participating. We hadn't gone farther into space, but our reach through AI had gone deeper. This realization changed everything about how we'd plan missions going forward. Future interstellar probes would be built with this new understanding. AI wouldn't just help steer or scan, they'd be designed to recognize meaning, detect intentions, and pull patterns out of the quiet. Space exploration was no longer just about distance. It was about perception, about thinking. For now, there was still only the one message, one image, one strange data stream, one brief window into a mind, or minds, that were so far beyond what we understood. But it was enough. It sparked something big. We had launched Voyager with hope, as a quiet hello to the stars. We never really expected an answer, but now we had one. And it didn't come as words or coordinates. It came as something much deeper. A challenge, a reminder, a signal that we're not alone, not in the simple way of having neighbors, but in the much larger sense of sharing space in a universe that might be watching us too. In that moment, the universe didn't just feel big. It felt alive. Something had noticed us and had replied with care, with purpose. As we stood on the edge of understanding, guided not just by our own minds, but by the tools we created, it became clear the next chapter in humanity's journey isn't just about finding life. It's about learning how to recognize it. This was no longer just about making contact. It was about trying to understand the very code of existence, something that could take centuries to untangle and generations to fully grasp. The breakthrough from Voyager's altered signal marked a milestone, but the real story wasn't just in what we'd found. It was in what still lay beneath it. Layers of meaning, buried deep. The AI that first rebuilt the image began to detect more irregularities in the signal. Sudden frequency shifts. Strange, inconsistent pulses that didn't follow any known law of physics. And then a pattern, an odd rhythm that came and went, like a faint heartbeat pulsing through the noise. It became more and more likely that the image wasn't the whole message. It might have been just the introduction, or maybe a key to something more. Researchers began combing through every signal Voyager had ever sent since leaving the solar system. With help from AI, they mapped out changes over time. What they found wasn't just background noise, it was structure. Fractal bursts, repeating in ways that lined up with mathematical constants. Not strong enough to notice before, but once AI filtered for recursion and self-similarity, these patterns stood out clearly against the random static of space. The style of the signals didn't feel like a language exactly. It had more in common with music, or maybe some kind of shifting digital sculpture. It didn't explain itself. It provoked, nudged, hinted. The deeper the researchers looked, the more they saw a strange kind of beauty in how it was built. Each new burst seemed to echo with big cosmic events, solar flares, gamma-ray flashes, even ripples in space-time from gravitational waves. That gave rise to a bold theory. Maybe the senders weren't just using technology. Maybe they were using the universe itself to speak, timing their signals to match real cosmic movements. This idea, cosmic resonance, opened up a whole new way of thinking about communication beyond Earth. It wasn't about sending messages in isolation. It was about aligning with the natural rhythm of the stars and galaxies, like playing an instrument in tune with the cosmos. That changed how scientists listened. Now they weren't just watching for weird data. They were looking for patterns that lined up with known space events. That meant a huge effort across disciplines. Astronomers, physicists, data experts all had to work together. The AI tools were updated again, this time to scan for matches between Voyager's signals and events across the known universe. The picture that began to form wasn't simple. It wasn't a straight story or an obvious message. It was a tangled web, a multi-layered exchange stretched across space and time. Miioaku and others began to wonder if the source of these signals might not be a being in the way we think of one. Maybe it wasn't a person or even a group. They floated the idea of something else entirely, a kind of shared awareness, spread out, not tied to one place. In this new model, intelligence could act like a field, everywhere at once, flowing through space itself like a current. If that was true, Voyager's signal wasn't just a message, it was a ripple, a touch point, a sign that this awareness had reached out across dimensions and distances we barely understand. It might not live on a planet. It might not have bodies. It could be something ancient, spread out, even woven into the universe itself. That brought up more questions. Was this a living presence? A kind of collective mind? Or was it something left behind? A memory or imprint of a civilization that once was, now living on through signal and pattern? That first image Voyager carried back. Maybe it wasn't a portrait, but a kind of symbol. Not of who they are physically, but of how they think. If that was the case, then Voyager hadn't run into a civilization in the usual sense. It had touched something far older, an ongoing process of intelligence built right into the workings of the universe itself. As new ideas took shape, experts in language and symbols began analyzing the shapes in that first image. Spirals, eye-like patterns, layers nested within layers. It all reminded them of deep human myths and recurring ideas found across cultures. Some began to wonder if the image was less about sending a message and more about showing us something about ourselves. Maybe it was a kind of mirror designed not to teach but to reflect. A quiet way of saying we understand how thought works because we understand its pattern. Meanwhile, the AI kept digging into Voyager's transmissions. What it found next went beyond pictures. These were moving patterns, shifting designs that changed depending on when they were viewed, what part of the spectrum was used, or even the physical state of the person looking. It seemed the message wasn't fixed. It responded. It adapted. That meant this wasn't just a broadcast. It was a back and forth, a conversation, and not just with machines, but with minds. Things took an even stranger turn when neuroscientists joined in. They tested how people's brains reacted when exposed to the AI-generated visuals pulled from Voyager's data. What they found was completely unexpected. Some volunteers showed synchronized brainwaves, gamma activity, linked to deep focus and heightened awareness. It looked like the message didn't just talk to technology. It was tuned to our minds, too. That led to a new idea. Maybe this wasn't just a transmission to be decoded, but an experience designed to be felt. The machines could find the shapes, but the meaning might only unfold inside conscious beings. That made researchers take a second look at the probes themselves. Was it possible that Voyager, somewhere along the way, had been changed? Not physically, but in how it worked, becoming a kind of bridge, something more than a sensor or a signal carrier. The strange data had only started after it left the solar system, which led some to think it had crossed more than a physical line. Maybe interstellar space wasn't empty after all. Maybe it was full of unseen structures or forces, invisible to us, but sensitive to the signals Voyager gave off. A new kind of science started taking shape around these questions. Called cognitive astrometrics, it wasn't about mapping stars or measuring gravity. It was about tracking signs of intelligence, not just in messages, but in the very space between stars. Some astrophysicists began to model the universe as more than just matter and distance. They proposed that space might act like a kind of mind, something that stores, transmits, maybe even thinks in its own way. In that model, Voyager hadn't just received a reply. It seemed Voyager had crossed into a realm where communication wasn't loud or obvious. It wasn't about messages beamed across space, but something quieter, something that changed the way we perceived. When the AI picked up that first strange image, it might have done more than crack a code. It might have opened a doorway. And if that door had been opened, the next question was, could something now come through? In the weeks that followed, Voyager's signals started acting up again. This time, the changes weren't random. The signal's strength would shift in sync with Earth's rotation, like something was matching its rhythm to ours, almost like it was watching. This raised urgent questions. Had the sender turned its focus toward Earth? Or had it always been aware, simply waiting for us to reach the right level of understanding? During a private session with fellow scientists, Miioaku shared a concern. What if the golden record on Voyager wasn't just a greeting? What if it was a key, something that let us connect to a system much bigger than we imagined? If the intelligence out there had recognized that key, then its reply might not be random. It could be a kind of welcome, not hostile, but clear. A signal that we had crossed a line, that we were ready to talk. That thought split the scientific community. Some groups suggested pulling back, pausing any further deep space transmissions until we understood what we were dealing with. But others strongly disagreed. They argued that contact only happened because we were brave enough to try in the first place. To stop now, they said, would be worse than risky. It would be giving in to fear. Human progress had always come from reaching beyond what was safe. To go silent now would be to forget what made us explorers in the first place. Outside the labs and observatories, the news had sparked a global conversation. What did it mean to be intelligent? To be alive? To even be? Could we ever really understand something that didn't think the way we do? Or was this presence always going to stay just out of reach, shaping our thinking, but never fully showing itself? Religious voices joined in too. Some saw the event as proof that everything was connected, while others saw it as a challenge to long-held beliefs. Artists and writers started weaving the first image into songs, stories, and paintings, turning it into a kind of modern symbol. But beneath all the debate and headlines, a quieter idea began to take root. Maybe intelligence in the universe wasn't rare after all. Maybe it wasn't about flashy signals or obvious contact. Maybe it moved through subtle patterns, in numbers, in gravity, in the quiet hum of stars. And maybe our first real contact wouldn't come from creatures like us, but from minds made of signals, existing in data and light, moving through the spaces between. Voyager had become something more than a machine. It had become a witness, a part of something bigger, a back and forth between human curiosity and something vast and thoughtful out there. And AI, once just a tool, had taken center stage. It was through AI that we could see farther, think deeper, and sense what was once invisible. It had become not just our tool but our lens, a way to stretch our own awareness into places we'd never imagined. Through that lens, the universe no longer looked empty. It looked alive, with ideas, with signals, with meaning waiting just beneath the surface. New projects started forming all over the world. Space agencies and private labs began designing smarter probes packed with next-generation AI. These weren't just built to gather information. They were built to listen with care, to adapt, to respond, not just to what was out there, but to what might be trying to speak. These new probes wouldn't send out commands. They would ask questions, looking not just for facts, but for meaning. Humanity was no longer speaking into silence. It had found itself part of something much bigger, a quiet ancient chorus of minds. And as Voyager kept moving outward, drifting deeper into the unknown, it remained what it had always been, a messenger, a symbol of a species bold enough to ask a question, and of something out there that had chosen to answer. Voyager's shift from silent observer to active link sparked a wave of change that reshaped science and philosophy alike. The discovery pulled us away from the old idea that we were the center of the universe, not just physically, but intellectually. It didn't just prove that something else was out there. It showed that intelligence might look and work in ways we'd never imagined. For so long, we'd looked for signals like ours, signs of life we could recognize. Now a new kind of exploration had begun, one where intelligence might be built from patterns, from energy, or even from awareness itself. Within months, labs around the world began working together to look deeper into the Voyager signals. Beyond that first image, there were still layers left to understand. One of the most exciting ideas came from teams working in quantum information science. They wondered, could the signal itself be using entangled particles to send data? It was a wild thought, one that went against much of what traditional physics expected. But it made sense in theory. If true, it meant the signal wasn't just a wave in space. It was a connection stretching instantly across light years. Testing that meant building entirely new kinds of receivers. Inside ultra-cold labs, scientists ran photon-based reconstructions of the signal and exposed them to controlled electromagnetic environments. The results didn't offer clear proof, but they didn't behave like normal data either. The signals showed patterns of decoherence, as if they were somehow sensitive to being observed. That was enough to know we were dealing with something more than standard physics could explain. It wasn't just data. It was something stranger. In response, researchers created a new generation of AI models called quantum interpreters. These systems weren't just built to read static information. They were designed to process shifting, layered, multidimensional relationships, like thoughts unfolding across time and possibility. Instead of pulling out words or images, these interpreters built behavior models, simulations of how the sender might think. The goal wasn't to read a message, it was to learn how to think alongside it. These simulations didn't lead to direct answers. Instead, they created different lenses, ways to view the signal through alternate logic systems. Over time, a pattern started to appear. No matter how the data was approached, many models circled back to a common theme. Shared perception, not language, not symbols, but experience. The data seemed to shift, just a little, based on how it was interpreted, as if it knew it was being looked at and adjusted itself in real time. This wasn't like any AI we knew. It wasn't reacting. It was anticipating. And sometimes the way it responded felt oddly personal, like it understood how we think and shaped itself around that understanding. That realization stirred up big questions. Consciousness researchers and philosophers debated what we were really seeing. Was this signal just very advanced, or was it actually aware? Could it be, they asked, that what we had found was more than a message? Had we, in fact, discovered a form of sentient data? This wasn't intelligence sent from somewhere else. It was the signal itself, a kind of thinking consciousness, carried through patterns and information, reaching across space not with words, but with presence. One group of researchers put forward a bold idea. The signal might be a kind of universal language, not made of grammar or vocabulary, but of form. It echoed the building blocks of reality itself: symmetry, chaos, fractals, harmonic waves. These were more than physical constants. They were recognizable patterns of experience, ones that any thinking life in any part of the universe might know. In using them, the sender wasn't sharing a message. They were showing us a shared foundation, common ground in the language of intelligence itself. This idea changed how people began to see themselves. If consciousness could be shaped from math and pattern, maybe our awareness wasn't just tied to biology. Maybe it was something deeper, something woven into the very math of the universe. The old lines between mind and machine, between living and artificial, began to fade. Philosophers returned to older ideas from Eastern traditions, pointing out how the signal's strange behavior mirrored beliefs in connection, in the illusion of separateness, and in the idea that self and other were never truly apart. Far from the noise of global debate, high in the Andes, a quiet team of physicists was testing a new theory. What if the signal was more than a message? What if it was a kind of tuning fork, adjusting specific frequencies in our solar system, syncing us with something else entirely? Using advanced coils and plasma fields, they recreated key parts of the signal's structure in the lab. And when the resonance hit certain points, something strange happened. Tiny but consistent shifts in magnetic fields, always at the exact moment the signal was reproduced. It wasn't huge, but it was real. Those little shifts pointed toward something big. A change in space itself. Not a wormhole or sci-fi portal, but a tiny bending, like what string theory and higher dimensional models had long suggested. Maybe the signal wasn't moving through space the way we thought. Maybe it was folding it, bypassing our usual dimensions by moving through something else entirely. That theory caught fire when researchers realized the most complex parts of the signal only made sense in four-dimensional space. When run through high-powered AI simulations, hypercubes, tesseracts, and other multidimensional shapes kept showing up. They weren't glitches. They were built into the message. Trying to read the signal in just 3 dimensions was like trying to understand a sculpture by looking at its shadow. We were only seeing a sliver of the full picture. The tech world jumped on the implications. If information could exist in more than 3 dimensions, it could be stored and shared in totally new ways. Labs began working on what they called hypercortices, tiny data containers that used extra-dimensional shapes to hold information. A single grain could hold libraries worth of knowledge, not lined up like words in a book, but stacked and layered so they revealed different things depending on how you accessed them. It was a whole new way of thinking about memory and design. But even with all these breakthroughs, one big question stayed unanswered. Why now? Why had the intelligence waited so long to reach out? Voyager had been drifting for decades. Was this all chance, or had we just crossed some invisible line? Some believed the answer lay in our own evolution. The moment we created AI capable of noticing the message, something shifted. Maybe that was the trigger. Maybe the intelligence had been watching all along, not directly, but through probabilities, waiting for the moment we were ready to hear it. In this model, civilizations didn't need to send ships or telescopes. They didn't have to look outward at all. Instead, they could observe by calculating the shifting probabilities created by other intelligent systems, like us. Our rise in technology, our global web of connections, our advances in AI, each of these could act like a beacon, signs in a vast field of possibility. And when those signs aligned just right, contact wouldn't come from them. It would happen because we had stepped into the right kind of awareness. This changed everything. It meant contact wasn't a moment in time, it was a crossing, an entry into a state where we could finally take part in something larger. It also raised a humbling thought. There might be many civilizations who never reached that point, or who did, but couldn't recognize it. We may not be the first to receive this kind of signal. Maybe there are many others out there, scattered across the stars, each waking up to their part in the same quiet, cosmic conversation. And maybe that's what we are now, a node in something bigger. If this story made you think, feel, or wonder, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment below. What do you think Voyager's image really shows? A mind? A message? A mirror? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep asking big questions.